I'll try to give the context in which in Chile is developing right now the teacher education field, and it could be described very simply that two major things define the more general political framework in which this strategic area of education develops. On the one hand, it is a sector which has exploded in terms of enrollments and number of programs that are offered. And this is connected to social mobility factors and processes, much more than with the requirements of the schooling system, which is in a stable phase in terms of enrollments. Thank you very much. There is, could you do the next one? Now, for that scheme, I was saying something about the field of teacher education in Chile, how it's being affected by two very different forces. One is to do with social mobility, very rapid increase of tertiary education enrollment, and within that, an explosion of the numbers in this field. On the other hand, a very explicit political effort to improve the quality and the attempts to raise the standards in this field, which paradoxically has lowered drastically its selectivity. So I'll give you some data on these two contradictory forces. From society, you could say that the teaching profession is very attractive and traditionally the most wide doors for entering the profession has been for newer groups in the university, the education careers. So a lowering of selectivity barriers, explosion of enrollments on the one hand, and on the other, this need to raise capacities of the professionals in education. We'll look at some data on that. I'll refer then to what I think is a feature a very common feature of teacher education throughout Latin America, particularly in all the countries that train the teachers at the university level, which are the majority, and which a feature which has to do with the distance between what the schools of education do and the requirements of schools out there in society. Something which underlined Rachel Lozan in her presentation about one of the key principles of this STEP program, the unity of theory and practice. We have very serious problems, very serious challenges in that sense in our part of the world. We prepare teachers in institutions very distant from schools. And I'll finally refer to some of the key principles that in which STEP is embedded in its practices and the relevance and influence in Chile. The next slide, please, Juan. I won't go through all of the contents of the slide, but this is more or less what I was saying about causes of concern about teacher education in Chile. and this contradiction between what this expansion means in terms of what kind of students are the basis for our education of teachers attempts, and on the other hand, the clear need, defining the policies of the last decade and a half to very substantially raise the level of our graduates, both of primary teachers and secondary teachers. The last bullet says, comparatively weak quality assurance of initial teacher training. Indeed, Chile has a very oriented and regulated by choice principles, and for the last quarter of the century, teacher education was not regulated at all, and this very, very drastic transformation of its numbers is directly linked to this absence of regulatory an absence of a regulative framework. In the last 5 years, across two governments of very different political inspiration, the new framework of regulation is being installed. Here is some data. You can see the evolution of the enrollment in the last, in a long period from 1970 until the end of the last, until 2008. And you can see that for almost 35 years, enrollments in Chile oscillated between 25,000 and 40,000 students, and that from 2002 onwards, those numbers multiplied by a factor of two or more. Nowadays, we have Chile is a small country, only a teaching course of 180,000 teachers, and a system with enrollments of 3.5 million. I can see the smiles of my Brazilian colleagues. We have the numbers of one state in Brazil. But for those numbers to have an enrollment, imagine a teaching course of 180,000 teachers. Nowadays, Chile has studying for becoming teachers 130,000 students, which is completely beyond these historical trends and the numbers of the school system. The next slide, please, Luana. In terms of results, you are observing on the horizontal axis almost 40 institutions preparing teachers, and on the vertical axis, the percentage of correct answers in a national test, voluntary test, at the end, at the graduation time. And you can see the dispersion is immense. There are institutions in which the graduates answer less than 40% of the questions, and some over 60%. On the whole country average, these are very worrying figures. The majority, you could say, of our graduates just before entering the profession, in terms of the pedagogical knowledge, dominate or are proficient in only half of the competences being evaluated. Next, please. Chile participated in the TED study of the IEA in 2008, the mathematics test for primary teachers. You can see the ranking of the results, average results country. and dismal results. Children this caused a political uproar naturally, and I think when the political class, the political system of Chile realized this, the general attitude about not regulating this sector, not setting up a system of for ensuring some minimum level of quality evaporated, and now there is a consensus pro-regulation. At the center, next please, Luana. At the center, you can see, yeah, in terms of evolution of policies, the graphic attempts to give you a synoptic perception of this evolution from non-regulation and an attempt to impact institutions to reform, that is point A, to point D, examinations and standards. In the last 4 years, examinations, national examinations for students graduating from schools of education have been voluntary, but a law is being discussed right now in Parliament to define it as mandatory in such a way that you cannot join the profession without passing that exam. So from invitation and no regulation whatsoever to strong framing of the sector and accountability logic. Now, in the center, a key piece for this framework of regulating the sector is the definition of standards. Standards which define for the whole system of teacher education, for the students finalizing their studies, his or her studies, should know and should be able to do in order to be qualified as an able teacher. There is no time to go into how those standards were agreed upon and generated. It's a key process that you produce an agreement regarding these definitions, an agreement between government, the universities, and the profession out there in the field. So a key political as well as technical build-up and construction of agreements behind this very, very important piece for our educational systems, standards for the profession. The next, we are running out of time. The next one again. Just a view of the different domains of the standards. There's no time to go into them, but while you read them, try to associate them with the 4 principles of the STEP program described by Professor Lotan. There is a need to construct the moral basis of the profession in terms of commitment to the learning of all the students. There is a domain which is directly to do with knowledge not only of an area of knowledge, the disciplines, but of the national curriculum, and about the key secret of every area of knowledge, and the skills that demand from the student those disciplines. And finally, the third domain, crucially about teaching and pedagogical content knowledge. and deep understanding of how students learn. So imagine these three domains having for each of them very specific standards with their indicators and their finally defined again descriptions of attainment. A key piece which nowadays are in the desk of every dean of education in Chile, which are under the obligation actually to compare their practices, their curriculum, their assessment, their clinical practices against each one of these national standards, and see the differences or the coupling between standards and their own practices. I want to make a couple of points about my final topic. The next, please, Luana. The next one. A very simple model to try to picture this reality, which affects practically all teacher institutions, teacher education institutions in Chile, and in many Latin American countries. And this major feature is to do with a distance with the school system. It is as if the main focus of attention, of incentives, and how every one of our professors are evaluated, have as reference the academic field of education, the university, and the research logic. And at the same time, very paradoxically, the schools of education with links, with relationship with the school system and the actual school teaching practices. This affects every school of education in my country, and this is the major problem. We need to as it were, redirect how our institutions are organized and institutionally regulated in order to put at the center, at the very core, the responsibilities in terms of preparation, education of the professional basis of the school system of the country. In this attempt, I want to share with all of you that the principles that are the basis of the Stanford Education Program are, I think, of universal application. Rachel was very prudent, very hesitant about, and very rightly so, about the mechanical application and the risks of being mechanical about the application of these principles. But she used the word or the meaning of the realization of those principles depend on every national context. I want to, and with this I'll finish. The next one, please, Luana. Just want to underline the next slide, please.
You have 10 minutes.
We can skip that one. Put the next one on step, please. Yeah, we ran out of time. These major three principles, being in Latin America and working in Chile in this, I want to be very explicit with and invite my Brazilian colleagues to to appreciate that the first one has a key connection with the second principle. You have to have a vision, but that vision has to be shared in order to have coherence. Our programs typically are lacking coherence because we don't have a unity regarding vision. Ours is a very ideologized field with very different visions about what good teaching in poor contexts mean nowadays. And without that shared vision, you cannot produce coherence in what you do as teacher educators. And I am particularly sensitized to these two because we like both of them in our institutions, in generally speaking in Latin America, and we need to start from there, putting all the energy in constructing, all the necessary energy in constructing a minimum agreed upon set of principles, which are the basis of the coherence that you need between your curriculum, your evaluation, and your clinical practice. The third principle that I wanted to underline, coming from the STEP program, is that your curriculum has to be grounded in practice. This is very difficult for universities in general and for schools of education in particular. This is the major challenge in Latin America, I think. It is a major challenge for us nowadays in my faculty. This intimate connection between the declarative knowledge that is communicated in our courses with what goes on in the clinical practical, with what goes on in terms of the growing capacities of our students to be able to enact some criteria which are grounded in good knowledge about how students learn, about the national curriculum, about the different disciplines. I'll end with that. Very good principles, very difficult and challenging to implement in our context, and clearly the basis for aspiring to produce the teachers that our societies are wishing us to produce. Thank you very much.